If we take stock of how we're thinking throughout the day, we find that what's really happening is that we're just bouncing from thought to thought all day long. And as we're bouncing from thought to thought, we often don't realize that many of those thoughts are stressful ones and that they're connected to and triggered by very specific workday situations that we encounter. And because we're bouncing around from thought to thought all day long, our relationship to those thoughts is one of a passive participant. In other words, we let our thoughts have an effect on us over and over again, rather than choosing to become an active participant in what we do with them. So in this episode, I want to teach you a concept that will help you identify a stressful thought that's connected to a specific workday situation that you encounter, and teach you how to come up with a plan for how you can become an active participant and reframe that thought the next time the situation arises. Here we go. Hey, welcome to the Workday Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Amoroso. Every workday we encounter dozens of situations that we have to navigate in order to have a successful and productive workday. And the way you choose to think through those situations helps shape not only the kind of day you have, but the trajectory of your career. This podcast is all about helping you to navigate those situations, show up at your best, and be happier at work. I want to teach you a technique that's designed to help you address challenging situations or negative thoughts you might have during your workday. And we call this technique when this, then that. So if you take a moment to think about how you're thinking during a workday, what you're really doing all day is just bouncing from thought to thought. So a new task comes up that you've never done before. You have a thought about it. Someone sends you an email asking you for a status update. You have a thought about it. You get some negative feedback from a client or from a boss. You have a thought about it. You're spending way more time on something that you thought would be easy. You have a thought about it. And if we dig into what those thoughts are that we're having in connection with each of these situations, what we realize is that many of those initial thoughts are not empowering thoughts for us. The default thought that comes to mind often has something to do with a limiting belief that we have about ourselves. They have to do with fear or anxiety or being tired or frustrations, concerns, what we perceive others are thinking about us, our own self-worth, things like that. And if we're not careful, we really can move through an entire day bouncing from situation to situation and experiencing these thoughts. And we don't even know that it's happening because we've conditioned ourselves to associate workdays with stress. Our brain is very used to thinking that workdays equal stress and that stress must be a part of our day. And so if that's our default way of thinking, then when we have a situation pop up that triggers a stressful thought, we either don't acknowledge that it's actually happening, or we just sort of chalk it up to, well, I'm at work, so this is normal. But here's the big secret. We don't have to settle for this as normal. Just because that's something that's been conditioned into us and we've observed to be quote unquote normal, and just because everyone else around us is feeling stressed and talking about how stressed they are, that doesn't mean that we have to buy into that reality. So this is one of the reasons why working on your workday mindset is such an important thing for you to do. Because what we can do is train our brain to have a different response to a situation that would normally trigger us to have a stressful thought. So I want to show you one way that I've managed to deal with stressful thoughts that I encounter in my workday. And the technique is what I call when this, then that. So here's how when this, then that works. We want to identify a stressful thought that's connected to a situation that you encounter. And we want to come up with a plan for how you're going to reframe that thought the next time this particular situation arises. And there are 4 steps in this process that I want you to follow. So step 1 is to identify a recurring stressful workday situation that you experience. So just think about a particular situation that every time it occurs, you feel stress. It could be receiving a certain type of email, interacting with a certain person on your team or a client, that moment when you feel like you're way behind on a project, any situation that causes that stressful thought. And just so we have an example we can work with, I want to give you one that for me, early on in my career, really got me stressed. And it was when I received very poignant, constructive feedback from someone. When someone would tell me that they disagreed with me, or they commented on my work, or gave me feedback, it felt like a personal attack. And I would get all worked up about it. So let's use that one as an example. Step 2 is to write out the reactive thought you have that's the root cause of the stress. So in my example, the reactive thought I used to have was that this was an attack on me. It was personal. They don't think my work is good enough. And it didn't really matter if I had had a great working relationship with that person. The first thought I would get is that they don't think I'm good enough, or my client is upset with me, or this is going to change their viewpoint of me. So step number 2 is just simply write down what that first thought is. Step 3 is to draw a line through that reactive thought. So just take your pen, draw a line through it. So this is in part symbolic, but I also want you to really internalize just letting go of this reactive thought. And then step 4, I want you to identify 1 to 3 things you're going to do the next time this situation comes up and when you catch yourself having this reactive thought. So something that will help you turn that reactive thought into something constructive that you can do to process it. And what we're trying to do here is come up with a plan that we can set into action when this stressful situation arises in the moment. It's almost like we're building a little mini roadmap for ourselves in anticipation of this situation so that we can navigate it better each time it pops up. We want to be moving from passively accepting this stressful situation over and over to us being an active participant in changing it. And I want you to keep your plan really simple. And I want you to think about things that will help you to reframe this. So if we go back to my example, I decided that anytime I received some kind of feedback that made me uncomfortable, I was going to follow these 3 steps. Step 1 was to get up from my chair and take a deep breath. Step 2 was to take a couple of minute break. And then step 3 was to remind myself that the feedback I received is not about me, the person. It's not personal. It's in connection with my work. And I also reminded myself that every piece of feedback that I get is a golden opportunity to improve and to get better. So when this particular situation arose for me, those are the 3 things I did to reframe my thoughts around it. And what this did for me is it helped me acknowledge much faster that I was experiencing a stressful situation and a reactive thought that didn't really match reality. Sort of like, oh, okay, here's this feeling again, the one that always creeps in when I get feedback. And then once I acknowledged that, I could address it from there. And I can tell you that over time, the anxiousness that I felt around this situation eventually dissipated, and the situation is no longer such a strong trigger for me. In the present day, I really welcome feedback because then I can turn that into a chance to learn and a chance to get better. So let's just recap these steps. Step 1, identify a recurring stressful thought you experience that's connected to a very specific Workday situation. Step 2, write out the reactive thought you have that's the root cause of that stress. Step 3, draw a line through that reactive thought. And then step 4, identify 1 to 3 things you're going to do the next time this situation comes up and you catch yourself having this reactive thought. So take this concept for a test run this week and see how it works for you. If you want a simple worksheet that you can use to visualize how to do this, we've put up a PDF at drewamoroso.com/podcast. And if you click on this episode, you can download the PDF and use it for yourself as a guide. So I think what you'll find is that part of the art of managing stressful situations involves your ability to catch yourself when you're in the throes of feeling that stress, and then repeating a few simple steps to help you actively work through it. So remember to always focus on ways you can move from being a passive participant to being an active one. That's where the real change occurs. Go have a great workday. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Workday Mindset Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate it if you could head over to whatever service you're using to tune in and give us a 5-star review. The Workday Mindset Podcast is a collaboration with Populous Radio. Check out their other shows at populousradio.com. Thanks for tuning in, and go get them.